Hello 12, welcome to another flipped video for maintaining a balance. Today we are looking at adaptations of Australian organisms to temperature regulation. Let's have a look at what our dot point's asking us to do. So the first verb we see is analyse information. So this is about asking questions of your searching capacity, like how are you tapping into the wealth of information that's out there on the web. What faculties are you using to determine credibility, usefulness, and relevance? So that's what that little bit means. And then we're looking for descriptions of adaptations and responses. So note the two words; they are different. Adaptations and responses are different, that have occurred in Australian organisms. And we are looking at in the context of temperature regulation. So let's get into it. This is a skill builder. Yoo-hoo! Look at this dude. Gosh. Alright, we don't really care. So, skill building. What are we trying to get out of this for you? Firstly, is to know how to use technical terms in searches. Or kind of like throwing your net a little bit wider, depending on what words you use in your searches. So that's just about being a little bit more resourceful and widely read. Sorry, the next one is being read widely. So you got to go past the first Google hit, or even the first page sometimes. Particularly if we get into the habit of searching for, we type in adaptations to assist in temperature regulations, Australia. Like, those types of resources are out there, but you got to kind of look a little bit broader than that. Mainly because what you're going to get is a whole bunch of HSC resources. Biology is one of the most well-resourced subjects in New South Wales and on the web. But it's kind of like just going straight to the back of the book and looking for the answer. You're not really learning anything. So just try to avoid HSC websites. We're really kind of digging for information, and the main reason for this is that out in the real world, you're not going to get a back of the book answer sheet. You want to be able to know how to find the information that you need. Okay, so just be aware of that. Like, we're doing this to build a skill. Obviously, there are lots of answers out there that we can look at, but if you just go straight to them, you're not gaining that skill. Alright, so the other thing is you've got to look at the usefulness of the information. How does it serve your purpose? So if you're looking, that puts the content and the context together. It's making use of that context. And then, you're making some really sensible decisions about kind of whether or not you should trust a source of information. Does it come from a .edu website or a .gov or some sort of recognised authority? So if you're looking at Australian animals, did you go and look at the Taronga Zoo website? Are there wildlife parks? Are there is it some sort of like conservation institution like that might help you come to some information that's relevant to Australian examples, and maybe local examples. That's your call. Alright, so let's have a look at these two words that are in our dot point. They are adaptations and response. So the definition of an adaptation is a change in a species that makes it better suited to its environment and consequently improves its chance of survival and reproductive success. The key thing about an adaptation is that it's genetic. It's determined by genetics, which means it can be passed on, which means it has an effect on the long-term and short-term survivability of that species. So it has a lot to do with when we look at the evolution topic. Knowing what an adaptation is will help you kind of understand why an organism might have a feature. They are generally to help improve its reproductive success. Right, so there's three types of those adaptations. That you can have structural, so that's actually like a physical part of an organism. It might be like dense bones or a long neck or a long tail. That's a structural feature. Right, that help it to survive in its natural habitat, such as skin color and shape. A physiological, these are generally internal systems that are present in an organism that allow it to perform a certain biochemical reactions such as making venom, secreting slime, and regulating body temperature. Another one, and this is where we kind of need to make sure that we are clear about our definitions of an adaptation versus a response. You can have a behavioural adaptation, and this is special ways an organism behaves to survive in its natural habitat, such as becoming active at night. Now you might go, well, isn't that kind of just a response? You know, like, isn't that just, you know, something that it does? Well, yes, but it's governed by genetics. You know, owls don't just kind of go, well, I'll, you know, I was a daytime bird, and now I guess I'll, you know, have a coffee and wake up and be a night owl. You know, it's coded in their genetics, you know, to be active at night. So you've got to think about kind of, you know, is it a behavioural adaptation or is it a response? So in order to make that, we need to have make that decision. We need to look at what the definition of a response is. A response is the action taken by an organism after detecting a stimulus. We've kind of seen this already in our stimulus response pathway, but you don't have to think of it in such kind of like blocky terms. Responses are not generally genetic, but they can be learned and taught from one generation to the next. So examples just might be seeking shade when it's hot, or licking its paws to cool down. These, you know, you can take a bath, you know, like jumping in the pool to cool down. You know, you could teach that to your offspring in order to survive. And so once one organism sees it done, they'll kind of do that, and you kind of go, all right, so they are cooling down or they are heating up or whatever it is, but they don't pass that information on genetically. If you have any questions about kind of these two things, that's kind of what you need to be trying to clarify with your teacher. So if you come across an example that you're not sure about, bring it to our attention and we'll help you work through it. Alright, so in class, it's basically you're going on a big hunt for information. So the first thing is we've got to think about, well, if we're looking at Australian organisms, then what are the Australian environments that they live in? So we, you know, I've simplified it hugely here, but I've provided three, you know, generalized climates, and then given you some kind of specifics in there that you might want to dig in. So we've got cool and cold with alpine and the Southern Ocean. We have seasonal, so you've got, you know, periods of cool, periods of hot, periods of, you know, windy and all that stuff. So temperate zones, if you're not sure what the temperate zone is, it's basically, you know, Goulburn's in the temperate zone. You know, grasslands, woodlands, that type of stuff are generally found in the temperate zone. Then we have coastal regions. Now coastal regions are also kind of pretty good because you can have organisms that actually might go into the, you know, maybe some sort of bird, you know, has goes into the water and on hot land. So, you know, you might have a temperature differences there. And then you've got hot. So Australia is notoriously a hot country. We have an ample amount of desert space, which means we have a lot of organisms that are adapted to this environment. So a desert is just generally a good one to study. We've got lots of great examples of Australian organisms that have adaptations and have responses that allow them to exist in the hot desert. We also have the tropics, and so the tropics brings out the feature of, you know, what happens when an organism is wet and hot. You know, like you get that humidity. Maybe there's a requirement for a different adaptation there. So have a think about an organism from one of each of these environmental regions, and so you're looking at about three. Having examples, you need more than two. Examples in the syllabus generally requires you to have three. So please make sure you have three in your bank by the end of our work on this dot point. So you could set it out like this in a table. I suggest you know, it might be a useful way of doing this, but maybe you want to do this on a computer, and maybe you want to make sure you've got a picture of the organism. You know, you want to add another row or something. But essentially, this is going to be the crux of the information that you need here. You want to describe the adaptation. So you know, tell me what's it got. You know, a long tail, or you know. Big paws, or you know, lots of big thick coat or something like that. Or if it's a response, tell me what the response is over here. And then you're going to tell me if it's an adaptation, is it behavioural, physiological, or structural? And if it's a response, generally, you can just leave that blank. But so long as you've kind of made that distinction that you know whether it's an adaptation or a response, you can leave that blank. We have a section on how does it assist temperature regulation, and this is about kind of coming back to a context. If this is just an adaptation, some random feature of an animal, and it doesn't assist temperature regulation, then you really haven't analysed the information, which is the first part of our dot point, to be relevant. So you've missed the mark. You've pulled out the wrong information. So this is a little box that makes sure that you understand that the adaptation that you've got is relevant to the context that we need it in. And then a little box down here for a comment about its information source. Like, do you trust it? Did you find multiple sources of information that had this example in it? You've got you've got to make some sort of critical assessment about that. Okay, so actually having a box to say that, while at the time you might go, well, why do I need to make that type of comment? Well, it's good to get in a habit, and because it's in your dot point. It's not a common type of exam question, but you could say, in your studies you were asked to analyse information from secondary sources. Discuss the processes that you went through to make that analysis. You actually have to think about what you're doing in terms of making a decision, and that's a skill to have. Like a boss might go, well, how did you come to that decision? Well, you might go, I just googled the first hit. So you got to actually have a better leg to stand on than that. Alright, so again, this is kind of, once you've got your information, it's going to be a good activity for you to do. You might open your eyes a little bit with this. You're going to share your work with a classmate you don't regularly work with. And this is basically, just improving, class relations. The whole idea of the course is, you're not here on your lonesome, and you want to make sure that, if you're only in the same circle of people and work all the time, you can kind of get trapped in terms of limiting your exposure to things. So share it with someone who you really don't normally work with. You don't sit next to them. You're maybe not even in like friends circles and stuff. Like, just find someone and go, hey, look, we don't really chat too much. Let's share our work. And hey, presto, maybe you found. You pulled out the same examples, and maybe you were like, wow, we are so different in terms of our thinking. And the big thing in here is, are you exposed to new examples? This is great to see that what other people are interested in. Like all the animals that you choose in this exercise are, if you want to learn about, I don't know, the Tasmanian devil, then go and learn about the Tasmanian devil. Like you might find that maybe people are interested in the same stuff as you. So that's you got 3 kind of questions to kind of ask as you share your work, and then at the end of that, we want you to rate your response. So your table, did you address the question? How well do you think you answered the question of describing adaptations and responses to Australian organisms to assist in temperature regulation, and how well did you think your depth of analysis was? That's one thing that you won't really know unless you gauge it against someone else's work, and that's kind of the purpose of this as well. You kind of get an idea of going, oh god, I really only talk superficially about this. Maybe I need to go a little bit deeper. Or maybe you're in the other kind, you're like, man, I totally nailed that. Alright guys, we'll see you in class. Thanks.